Hey guys, how are you? So, in this video, I'm going to answer a question that might be perplexing some young nerdlings out there. Why are languages like C#, Java, Python, JavaScript, PHP, and other old school languages, why are they still so dominant in the software development space, despite the fact that you have younger, nimbler languages that some young nerdlings think are better? So we're going to jump into the reasons in this video. I'm just going to wait for a few people to jump on. How many are we now? There's always a bit of delay, so I don't know if people are going to show up. Yeah, so if you are here and you're listening live, please let me know that you can hear me and that you can see me clearly so I can proceed with confidence. All right, so that's it. We got 40 people. Okay, so people are starting to come on. I hope everybody is well. If you can hear me, again, leave a little chat comment. Yeah. Sup, hologram, nunchuck, Stef, bebop. I'm good. Nemanja, I'm very good, thank you. Like Flutter. Bonjour de Paris, Charlie Sel. Comment allez-vous, monsieur? Comment ça va, monsieur? Excusez-moi. Sometimes in my French, I use the overly polite form, I suppose, perhaps from talking to my grandmother too long. Hologram, bought the refactoring book. It's really helping. Fantastic. There you go. Did you get the Java or the JavaScript version of the refactoring book? Let me know. Okay, thanks for letting me know this sounds clear. Yeah, so we do 63 people. So I'm going to jump into the subject very quickly, and then we'll go do a little bit of Q&A. What are your lizard posts about? They're about your lizard brain, and it's about the new area I'm going to be exploring. I'm going to be teaching people about this kind of stuff. One of the reasons why my StudioWeb training app is so effective, like people go, oh my God, I learned so much, it's unbelievable, is because I understand the lizard brain. I understand the operating system of everybody's brain, so I'm able to structure my content and my application, in fact, respectful of how our brains actually take in new information. Okay, thanks for letting me know, Stephen. Cool. Hello from Finland. Very cool. Iraq. Very cool. All over the place. See, international coder friends here. Hello, mon ami Stéphane. Comment allez-vous? Monsieur Petit Frère, tout ça va bien avec moi. J'espère que tout ça va bien avec toi. Should I learn React or Flutter? Ooh, let the job market tell you. I know there's a lot more jobs right now in React, but Flutter, last I heard, is getting a lot of respect. So you might find some opportunity to jump in on Flutter early on, since it seems to have some traction. It's kind of like if you would have bought Bitcoin when they were 5 cents a piece, or $5 a piece, now that they're $18,000, right? You want to get in early on things if possible, but not too early. Hello from Sweden, PHP or Node.js, freelance PHP, working for companies, Node. Hi, is becoming a JavaScript developer a good strategy for beginners? Why not? It's a good strategy as any. All right, so I'm going to jump into the subject. Why are languages, old languages like C#, Java, JavaScript, Python, PHP, C++, why are they still so dominant today? You figure with all the new languages coming out, the Kotlins and Dart, etc., you figure that these new languages would supplant the old school nerd languages and all their what's the word I'm looking for? All their baggage that they have. You know, none of these languages are perfect by any means. They have some flaws with them, but they're still very dominant. Well, there's a few reasons. Let me jump into it. Number one, legacy investment. A lot of companies have put a lot of money into Java stacks, C# stacks, C++, etc., and they're not wanting to leave so quickly because it works. And they don't want to have to rebuild from scratch, which is the last thing you want to do. You do it once in a while, but you got to be very careful about that, because when you rewrite an application from scratch because you want to take advantage of a new platform or something, oftentimes you will be fixing bugs in the old platform in replacement for bugs in the new platform. So you have to be careful about that. Not always the case, but yeah. So yes, there's a lot of legacy investment out there in these technologies, Python, C#, Java, JavaScript, etc. People don't want to leave. The company owners don't want to dump everything because of some potential improvement. It'd have to be very significant in terms of people dumping their investment in some tech. That brings me to point number 2. The languages and the technologies, you can argue, have plateaued quite a bit in that there is no longer these huge radical changes in the advantages of the languages. So yes, there are some advantages in some areas, but it's few and far between. So like Python, its main thing, its flexibility, its ease of learning, its ease of use. Speed, not so much. But as I said in other videos, speed of runtime when the software actually runs, most of the time that's becoming less and less of an issue because processors and computers are getting so fast. Yeah, so the technology has plateaued. I think that the new languages that are out there, again, people who are big into Kotlin or Dart or whatever, they'll argue that it's so much better in certain ways, but for a new technology to replace an old established technology where there's a lot of legacy investment in code, the new technology has to be really, really good, like really good. There's some exceptions. It has happened a few times in my life, but not many. Another issue is that a lot of the shortcomings in some of the older languages have been fixed up. In terms of like PHP is a classic example where really old PHP was not very good. But they worked really hard to make it a much more robust, full OO language with lots of power and capability. So just updates. PHP 7 is a big difference from PHP 3. Same thing with Python. When Python went from the 2x to the 3x branch, they fixed a bunch of things. It's a better language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So languages that may have been here when they started, over the years of development have become here. So if a new language comes in starting here or just here, very difficult to supplant something that already has this huge user base. Finally, I think something I should point out, so let me finish that, excuse me. So the IDEs, besides the language improvements themselves, you just have better tools and frameworks around these environments and languages. So classic examples, when Ruby came out, Rails came out rather, it caused a big bunch of people to move over to Ruby Rails. A big part of it was because of Rails. And so what happened is that all the other verticals, all the other languages, whether it be Java and JavaScript and Python and PHP, they started adopting some of the protocols and some of the structures in Ruby on Rails, making wanting to switch to Ruby on Rails much less of an issue. When it first came out, it was a big leap ahead of the pack in terms of web frameworks were concerned. But as I said, Laravel got its first inspiration from Rails. I imagine Django. Django, I think, predates Rails, but they adopted a lot of stuff from Rails, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure about that last point, but nonetheless, the frameworks and the supporting technologies were developed to breathe new life into some older languages as the old languages themselves were improved upon. And finally, what any experienced developer will tell you, it's the coders that make the code. It's the coders that make the code. You can take any good coder and give them almost any of the key frameworks or languages, and they'll make it work into something good. Yes, in some areas, Python may be better than C++ and vice versa, Java versus JavaScript, etc. But at the end of the day, if you're a good developer, you're a good coder, you can take any of these technologies, with some exceptions, in exceptional circumstances, and you make them work. So why do I mention all this? Because the fear of learning the wrong stack is like the desire to have to learn the latest and the greatest, how that's so key is If you look out there in the real world where the jobs are, for every Dart job, there's probably 10,000, 50,000 JavaScript jobs, for example, right? So there's a lot of anxieties and fears about getting the right language or the right framework or learning the newest of the new, when the reality on the ground is that if you know any of these well-established technologies and you know your fundamentals, you can pivot and get jobs and you're okay. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. All right, so that's my bit. 10 minutes, I got it done in 10 minutes, amazing. All right, so I'll do a little Q&A and then we'll move on. I see serverless is taking the market. That could be. Yeah. I don't believe in going too far to one end of the boat, if you will. I think you can have a combination. Like StudioWeb, the third version of the application, it was based on a monolithic framework, but then we started expanding its capabilities through a series of microservices. So kind of a hybrid approach, you know? Carlos, he says, language is the past. Future is, do you know how to solve problems? Pretty much. Matthew says, I love Python. Thanks to Stef's course. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me know. I'm glad you would like the Python course. Cool stuff. Let's see what Farzad has to say. When you use any high-level language and IDE, and that means you not code from pure zero anyway. Sorry for my English. English is not my native language. Okay, no worries. So are you asking a question? When you use any high-level language and IDE, that means you're not code. Nobody codes from zero anymore, because whether you're using a higher level language, which basically has been built and written in a lower level language, whether you're using a web framework or templates, or whether you're using somebody else's database like Postgre or Mongo, you're using somebody else's code in some form or another. I say reuse, top 3 rules of coding, because if you use libraries, the libraries that you leverage to build your app will probably have much less errors and be much more refined than any code you could write. You use IDEs, because IDEs will catch errors, clerical errors, not logical errors, but clerical errors they will catch that you wouldn't catch otherwise. It will just speed up the coding process, makes it more fun. Hussein says, should I focus on concepts of coding? Write code. After you do your fundamentals, write code, because as you write code, the concepts will become much more easy to understand. Writing code is the key to conceptual understanding. So maybe spend 90% of your time writing code, 10% of your time reading about new concepts and stuff, or maybe even 95-5. Our AI overlords will make us use code in Ruby. It could be, if they want to slow us down. Farzad, no. It was the continue of my previous message. Haha, sorry. Boy. I didn't get that, sorry, I missed that. We're getting a lot of messages coming in. All right, so what else do we got for questions? Timothy says, what is your personal favorite language? And if it is PHP, how do you get around lacking of data structures? It's not PHP. I think in my coding career, I say I have the sweetest spot for me is probably Java, just because it's just timing thing, not because I think Java is intrinsically better than anything else. It's just when I was getting into Java in the mid-90s, 95 and up, and I was a hardcore Java programmer for a few years at least, Java just opened up a lot of things. It just made a lot of things much easier than prior to Java. So I got a lot of stuff done. So it's more nostalgia for me anyhow. Okay. Do you think that Java, with the new licensing model of Oracle, will decrease its popularity? I think I addressed this when it first came out. No, there's apparently a non-Oracle version that you don't have to pay a license for. You have to understand something. Very large corporations are not so concerned about licensing. They're much more concerned about tech support. So very large organizations will use an open source software because it makes them feel good, and that is supported and backed by a very large company. So if they use the Oracle virtual machine, they're doing it because they want Oracle support. As you could run Java, without Oracle. Where is Kotlin? Well, Kotlin I don't consider one of the old ancient languages. Kotlin is very good, and in fact, in the Android space, Google recommends Kotlin over Java. And I think it looks like there could be a trend towards people slowly who want to leverage the Java, the JVM, the JDK. No, I think it's JVM. Boy, I've lost track of my terms here. Anyway, to use Java, they'll use Kotlin instead because it's just a lot faster. Here we go. Aaron says, how many HTML, CSS projects should I have in my portfolio to get hired as an entry-level position? Just a few. All you need is a few. Like if you have 3 good ones, I think you have enough to show that you've done something. The Trinity is one of those magic numbers, How are we doing for time? All right, good, short. Bought the keyboard you had, great keyboard. Wish I could remove the numpad though. Yeah, I think it's a best keyboard I've ever used. I happen to like the numpad, but I can understand that because of the space it takes. What about C++? Again, it's one of those classic legacy languages that is not going to go anywhere. I learned that PHP 7 is faster and very efficient. Yes, it is. PHP 7, I can tell you from my own test, is 50% more efficient, that is to say, faster than PHP 5. PHP 5.x, whatever it was, I think it was about 5.6, it ran, in terms of runtime, run much faster in Python, much faster than Ruby, that's for sure. I'm not sure about JavaScript. But PHP 7 is even 50% more performant. So yeah, PHP is not the prettiest looking language when you're writing the code, but those dollar signs, but whatever, Sam Kama says, want to go into a competitive program just to help me improve my C++ learning. If I decide to be serious in CP, is it too late for me because I'm 38? No, not at all. But competitive program is kind of a gimmicky thing. You know what I mean? If you want to be a good C++ programmer, just start writing real C++ code where you're actually building things. That's the key. Tony, thanks for the content, Stefan. What is the best industry for self-taught software engineer if I don't want to be a web dev? Python scripting or something, data science, analytics? That's a good question. The web is always the best, especially for people without the official background. But you may want to get into Python scripting. You might find yourself, you could get a job, like say at an animation house who uses Python to manage the render farms and stuff. That might be an opportunity for you there, off the top of my head. What type of backend should I use for my Android app? Should I use BAS, like a base, I guess a database like Firebase, or parse to develop one on my own? No. You don't want to develop your own backend. You want to leverage tools that are already out there. Trust me, you have plenty of code to write. You have plenty of things to write building your own app. You don't need to start building databases or backend. Very rarely you have to do that now. It depends. What is the best IDE? You get 10 different people, you're going to get 12 different answers, I would look at Microsoft always does a good job. JetBrains always does a good job. So those are two off the top of my head. No, Rust will never replace C++. Yeah, I doubt that either. I would agree with you. Yeah, C++ is too much. I love your videos. Mr. IT Prime Minister, do you still do coding or prefer to delegate it? I don't have time to do coding these days. I delegate, I hire. I do occasional code inspections. At some point in your life, you're going to have to decide if you're going to continue being a coder or you're going to get into architecture or management or start your own business. I just don't have the time, you know. I just don't have the time. What do you think about Swift? I think Swift is a very cool language. Unfortunately, you can only use it to do, you can only use it to do one or two things, you know. Well, iOS and I think native Mac OS apps. They use Swift on the back end. There is server-side Swift implementations. I remember I looked at one of it. It looked really good. IBM put it out, which I forget now, and yeah, it went nowhere. They shut it down. IBM basically backed out of that project. So there are a couple of projects where they use Swift on the back end, but I would not pursue that. I would only use Swift if I was doing iOS. And even then, I would go for a cross-platform thing like a Flutter or React Native or PWA, etc. Let's see. I liked when you said in previous episodes about third world countries and languages is the obstacle for them. And learning English and communication skills is more important than learning framework. Exactly, yeah. You got to get those communication skills up and running. That's what the wizard is partly about, by the way, being able to communicate more effectively. That will help your career more than anything else. All right. Failed my Java exam today and feeling down, so I'm South Africa. No big deal, no worries. In the real world of development is filled with mistakes. That's why we don't have Windows 1 or Mac OS 1. We have 10, right? iOS 14, partly for new features, but partly for bugs. What are bugs? Mistakes, errors. So what? You failed the exam, big deal. Just figure out what you did wrong and write more code and write more code and write more code and then go at it again. You'll get there if you just keep working at it. Again, the key is to write code, not get caught up reading books or sitting passively by watching tutorials. Write code. That's going to help you understand the technology much more effectively and much more quickly. Daniel, do you think AI ML will take over our jobs in the future and therefore we will be out of work? Oh, I don't know. 30 years, 40 years? Way before AI takes away technology jobs, it will take away accountants and bookkeepers and anesthesiologists and many type of doctors, many of the tasks they do now could be replaced by AI. You know, there's so many jobs that will be replaced long before developers. So by the time it gets to development, the whole society will have to have been restructured. You know what I mean? So I would not worry about that. You have not answered my question. What is the best IDE for Python? I don't know, check out PyCharm, that's highly regarded. And look at Visual Studio Code. Do you hate IDEs like I do? I feel like they do most of the work. No, I wrote, when I was writing Java full time, and that was like, I don't know, my third or fourth language, I forget now. I would write Java using Notepad. Not Notepad++, just Notepad, because I was a hardcore guy. And then when I finally got around to using an IDE, I realized how silly that was, because the IDE will just make your code better. It will make your code faster, because it will take care of errors, typos will be caught, it will make refactoring your code much better. Check out the link below for the refactoring book to understand what that is all about. So yeah, I would say once you know your fundamentals, you understand language, to get into IDEs, because it's going to make you go from this productivity level to this very quickly. Trust me, don't be looking for code to write. There will be plenty of code to write. You should be looking for code not to write. Do you think TypeScript will take JavaScript place sometime in the future? I don't think in the next 5 years or so. I doubt it, but who knows? What is the best way to get into freelancing without doing web development, e-commerce, etc.? Well, what kind of what other development are you looking at? Yeah, you could be a general purpose programmer. Like, for example, I used this example before. My friend hired a developer, and a big part of the job was a lot of Python, but web scraping and stuff. It was still web, but it wasn't necessarily web development in the technical sense. That's good. Generic octopus. I like that. Hi, Stefan. Curious, is your Lizard Wizard course book will make any reference to Gotten and Murray's research on the psychology of relationships and how much of Lizard will delve into interpersonal skills? It's going to be a lot of no reference to Gottman, Cialdini, Kahneman, Crimmins, and a whole bunch of other stuff, I think, from my own experiences. Interpersonal skills are a big part of it because you're going to understand, once done this course, you're going to understand how the brain actually operates. And when you do, it will make it easier for you to communicate with people effectively. That's, I think, what it comes down to. All right. I need to know about AWS as backend for Flutter apps. I need to know about it. I don't know. I haven't used AWS with Flutter, so I couldn't say. Which one do you prefer to use, library or framework? Well, it depends on what you're doing, right? Sometimes, like, I believe in using frameworks, especially in the web apps. And then I'll implement our libraries depending on the needs of the project. So I will use a framework in any particular context if there is a framework there, because the framework will, in theory at least, well, more of it in theory, frameworks will make your code base more robust. It'll make it easier for it to onboard new developers, and the code base will just make your app better. So and a library, I would implement libraries when need be, Which major language is the cleanest, easiest to program in, and what's your favorite IDE? I think for a beginner, the easiest would be Python to get into. But once you get into software development, it's and you understand what you're doing, it doesn't. You pick a language depending on what you want to do. Sometimes Python will be the superior choice given the project. Sometimes it will be JavaScript. Sometimes it will be PHP, etc. Right. 326, not bad. All right, let's see. Okay, we got that done. Let's see, we're scrolling down through some questions. We'll be ending it off fairly soon. Would you recommend reading books about problem solving? I would maybe learn like top 5 strategies you can use, and then I would just jump into the game. So like one strategy to use to solve complex problems is to break the problems down into smaller components, and then you tackle each of the components. So I would learn like 3 to 5 techniques, like I just gave you one, and then I would just jump into it, learn how by doing. It's a skill set you have to develop. It's like if I taught you how to fight. If I taught you boxing, I taught you positioning, how to punch, and how to bob and weave, etc., etc., etc. I could teach you all this, but you still have to practice it. Practice makes perfect. Okay. Why is there no Golang on the list? It's actually it's called Golang by people, but apparently it's actually Go. But that's getting technical. It is one of the most popular microservices language right now. It is, yeah, but I was just talking about legacy. I was conceptually talking a broader concept about why these big old legacy languages are not going anywhere, I love in third world country. You live in the third world country. That's cool. One advantage is that things are inexpensive there relative to here. Redundant, best path for developer not interested in web development. Thanks for the info you provide, Stefan. I'm not sure about that. I'm glad I can help. Well. PHP is scheduled to launch on 26th and promises much more. Oh, there you go. Yeah, yeah. Hello, Madame Zorbaz. How are you? I hope everything is well in Toronto. What programming languages will have the most growth in the next few years? Well, let me pull out my crystal ball and I'll find out. I don't know. I think the technology is like, we're plateauing quite a bit, right? We saw a lot of evolution in especially the 90s, early 2000s, and then it's sort of like the rate of change kind of flattened off. Hard to say. It's hard to say. You might see, I think, one of the faster growing languages, you might see Kotlin. That'd be a guess. That'd be a guess. PyCharm is too slow. Do you think JavaScript is good for making AI? I'm sure you could with JavaScript, but I don't see why you would. I think all the lion's share of the libraries and the work in AI ML is Python, so I would just go there. Not because Python may be intrinsically better than JavaScript in that regard, just because that's where the action is. That's where you're going to probably have a ton of libraries, you know. Do you think Django Web Framework will dominate to a #1 spot in backend development in upcoming years? I don't think so. It might gain traction simply because a lot of AI developers are using Python, and then if they want to expose whatever services they develop to the web, they'll probably stick with Python. So it might rise, but do I see it dominating? No. I think the players I think everything is kind of pretty solid in place now, unless there's some huge disruption I'm not seeing. All right, how we doing? All right, 30 minutes, guys. That's it for today. I'm trying to keep these to a reasonable number. I'll answer 1 or 2 more questions. Let me scroll down, see what we got here. Are we hopping in the networks? No. All right, so what do we got here? Wizard. Roy Santos, should I get a domain name for my portfolio website, or is it fine to use the free one? Well, you want to get a job. Well, it's good. If you go on a date, is it good to borrow your mother's car, or would it be better if you had your own car? I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm sure you could impress her with your mother's car, but I think you might impress her more if you had your own car. Not necessarily the best analogy, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It's a job, you know. You want to get a job, maybe you should own a space of your own on the web, get your own domain, you know. It's just me. It's just me. All right. Should front-end developers use Webflow? If it works for your situation, why not? It's just a tool. It's just a tool. Rest in the next 10 years, I think it will be niche language, but you'll never know. PWA or move to native as a developer. Let the demand draw you in one direction or the other. I happen to believe that for many mobile development projects, PWA is more than sufficient. All right. Any other questions here? I'll leave with this. Greetings. Thanks for watching, guys. I will let you go. Not a bad stream. I'm trying to keep them under 40 minutes. I'll leave you with my little ASMR boat video that will calm you down. So just breathe deeply and slowly while you watch this video, and all your anxieties of the day will dissipate. We'll talk soon.